They say that two of the biggest occasions in life are, first of all, the day that you're born, and then the second one is the day that you figure out why. Isn't it great that as a person of faith, we can be in a position where we don't have to go through life wondering, asking the wrong question, which is often, what is it that I'm supposed to do in life? The real question should be, what is it that God wants me to do in life? And when we find the answer to that question, and he leads us in that direction, we'll be in a position where we were actually doing something that we were created and born to do. That's where we'll be happy. That's where we will thrive. And that is the subject of today's podcast episode of the Audacious Faith Podcast. So welcome to today's episode of the Audacious Faith Podcast. It's the place where we talk about people who know and have the audacity to believe that they were born not for just a random reason, but actually because they were supposed to make a huge, meaningful impact in the world. And today's guest that I have with me is someone who I appreciate very much. You're going to love hearing from her, and she has that mindset. And that is Jasmine Paron. So Jasmine, I'm so excited to have you with me, coming all the way from, you're like in Minnesota, right? Or Minneapolis? Where are you located?
I am based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I had them both right? All right. So I met Jasmine about probably a little over a year ago, I would say, through business, totally online. We've actually never met in person, but this is close enough. And I've just seen her as someone who really has an understanding of a call of God in her life, and that's what she's pursuing. And especially as a person who's really starting to discover that in life, make some big moves, I thought it would be great to spend some time with you today. So tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe some background, family, how you came to faith.
Yeah, so for me, I was born and raised in a dual income household. So I was definitely blessed to be raised with a mom and a dad who provided for my brother and I. Mm-hmm. And through them, I learned hard work. They really changed the trajectory of our family's path because of the sacrifices that they made at a young age. Yeah. So my mom, she grew up in a trailer home with a brother and a mother and a father who maybe wasn't the best dad growing up. Okay. And then my dad grew up more in a farm town setting, and together they met in high school and became pregnant at a young age. Okay. And when they became pregnant, they decided, okay, it's time to get our act together. And because of that, my brother and I didn't have to grow up the same way that they did. We had everything that we needed. We were always provided for, but it was one of those things where you just didn't ask mom or dad how money works or how much things cost. You were just thankful for what you were given and what we had. Yeah. And then from there, if you wanted anything more, it was really just a matter of hard work and working for the things that it is that you wanted. And so that's a little bit about my upbringing. Uh-huh. And then in terms of faith, I wasn't raised in a Christian household. My parents, they raised my brother and I that, you can decide for yourself what it is that you believe. Okay. They were raised in a Catholic household, both of them were, and they were very turned away from faith because of the way that they were raised in the Catholic setting. Okay. And they knew they didn't want their kids to experience that same religion that they had grown up with. Mm-hmm. And it really started a lot of questioning within myself. I always knew and I always felt there was a higher power, a higher purpose, something more than just me and the other humans on this earth. And it started a lot of questioning at a young age. And it wasn't until I was in 4th grade that I had my first real experience with death and a funeral. My grandfather had passed away, and he was a medicine man in our tribal community. So he was full-blooded Native American man. Like, you're just think of a Native American elder, and that was my grandpa.
Okay.
And so when he passed away, I only ever knew him as the guy I would see every other year who would bring all of his change that he saved up for me and just loved on me so much.
Well,
that was only how I knew him. So when he passed away, I was engulfed with a lot of ceremony, a lot of the Native American culture. And I really started asking, who was this man? You know, I knew growing up, he wasn't maybe the best father figure for my mom and her brother. And to now, when I was a young child, he was a staple, a spiritual leader in our tribal community. And so I just wondered, who was this man and what was it that made him, you know, could do a complete 180 in his life and really change his path.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just made me ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So that started me down a journey of trying to understand the Native American culture and customs and traditions. And it was really challenging. And I never really found answers in my seeking. And so it wasn't until I was in high school that I stepped foot into a church and was open to receiving what the Christian faith had to offer and what it talked about. You know, identifying so strongly with my Native American culture, I was very closed off to Christianity. I was very closed off to the Bible specifically, knowing what had happened in history, from boarding schools to genocide in the name of Christianity. So for me, it was something that I was completely closed off to. And so I started my journey into Christianity from a boyfriend. I was, as always, the guys, right?
It's always something like that. Yes.
Yeah. So I was dating somebody, and he was his destiny, he thought, was to go into the Marine Corps and be frontline infantry, fighting in Afghanistan. And that was what he wanted to do. And so I thought, well, I can't stop you from what it is that you want to do with your life. I want to support you the best way that I can. And when you're gone, I want to believe in something that I can keep you safe. I want to feel like I can do something to help protect you while you're gone. Yeah. And he said, well, I used to go to this church growing up. We could go check it out. And so I did. And I stepped foot inside the church, and I was like, what is going on? There's big TV screens, and there's a whole bunch of loud music, and like these guys are actually rocking, like they're actually like good at music. What? So it completely it wasn't what I had pictured as Christianity. It was kind of fun and uplifting, and something definitely stirred in my spirit when I came. And it didn't take.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, that's probably a huge contrast from what you were thinking with the Catholicism background and all that, right?
Yeah, definitely. I didn't think it would feel good when I walked into the church. I was expecting something really cold, and I was expecting something really like polished, and that was not what I saw when I went into the church. I saw a lot of people who looked like me, who were interested in the same things as I was interested in. So it was a difference than what I had expected going into it.
So God kind of really moved in your life pretty quickly at that point then, right? It didn't take long once you were there. Yeah.
So I think I had gone to 2 Sunday services. Maybe it was even just one. I'm not 100%. I don't remember exactly, but I do remember shortly after I had went to that first service, there was a youth night, and they had a professional football athlete come, and he was, the main event, the keynote speaker.
Okay.
And I remember at the end, he gave the call to salvation, just to simply raise your hand. And it was so impactful for me, because it was my first time really hearing that call,
Yeah.
and hearing it from somebody whose heart genuinely believed in what they were saying.
Sure.
And I raised my hand, and it's amazing to me, because I hear it over and over again, that there's no turning back. Like once you make that commitment in your heart, and once you just simply raise your hand and say that prayer out loud, that it really does awaken something within you. A light goes off, something happens on the inside.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, my life wasn't, I wasn't just like radically transformed in that moment, but there was something that happened on the inside of me, because it began a process, and it began a transformation within my spirit, that there was no going backward from that moment on. There was before that moment, and now, and then after. And I can remember that moment specifically.
That's awesome. So was it hard? I mean, it seems like it was a strong call. I mean, you literally just, the guy is up there sharing, and it was something that God just really gave you a belief in. I mean, your hand, was it hard to raise it, or it pretty much went up pretty easy at that point?
It was definitely, I did have fear. I was like, what am I doing? I didn't know everything. I had gone to church 1 or 2 times before. So
Right.
It wasn't like I knew everything there was to know about like Jesus or Christianity or Holy Spirit or God or the Trinity, or like none of that. I didn't know none of that. It was just, there was a stirring in my spirit to raise my hand. I think it comes down to more of like having a small seed of faith that, okay, well, Jesus, if you are real, if this is true, then I guess it can't really hurt for me to accept and to follow what my intuition or what my gut is saying to do in this moment. And I was so desperate for something that I hadn't found yet, that I thought, well, if this could be true, then I might as well just try. There's no harm, I think, in me trying and just seeing what happens.
Okay. So based on your background, because you mentioned how, you came in very opposed to that because of the culture, some of the history. I mean, obviously in history, people in the name of Christ have done things that, were not appropriate, were not right. And they've used the name of God to do that. And a lot of times God is blamed for that. I mean, it's associated and put that way. And so people are closed off. So how difficult was it to see the distinction that, wait a minute, that's people, and that's the sins of people, but God himself was good. God himself was loving. God himself was reaching out to you at this particular point. Did you have that hesitancy because of, it was so ingrained that was a direction you weren't going to go?
It was over a decade of it being challenging for me, and resisting, especially the Bible. I hadn't opened the Bible. I would go to service and they would give scripture and things, but I was so like, just always rebelling. Like I have a very like maybe critical, but broad, like deep mind. And I question a lot of things. And so it was over a decade of me meeting with various pastors or small groups, or spending time alone with God and praying, of me just really asking those questions, and I would say, and I think I feel like that's okay for me. to bring those questions to God and to wrestle with those hesitations within my spirit, because it wasn't until last year or so, maybe a little over a year ago, that I went up for prayer after a service, and they have these prayer teams at the church I go to, and it's just some random person. And I said, hey, I really feel like there's a spirit that's blocking me from receiving the Bible and the word of God in the Bible. And I'd like prayer to remove that spirit. And the person, they were like, I think you know what to pray, so I'm going to have you pray. And I asked for any spirit that was lingering from my past, from generations, to leave, and for me to be able to receive the Bible and to open it up and to contemplate, with God, the word, instead of just being so closed off and closed off to it.
Okay, so there was a real battle there. Even after taking a step of faith, there's still things that, and I believe a lot of people experience this, there's still things that they're holding on to. There's still some baggage. There's still some barriers that are there that God works through over time. So what would you say were the biggest changes that after coming to faith you've seen since then? I'm sure they're gradual and there's multiple ones. Are there any significant ones that stand out to you?
The most significant changes that I've seen is my openness to receive miracles in my life, and in the lives of other people around me, and to believe that, and to see and to witness miracles take place, whether that be through physical healing, through mental healing. Miracles. That's been the biggest thing in my life, with having, Christ in me, and utilizing that source. It's been a huge impact.
And that's hard for a lot of people, because even though we'll have a faith and people will make a decision, they'll pray a prayer like you mentioned, as far as understanding that God can literally intervene in the biggest messes and the biggest challenges of life, often it takes some more faith that they don't necessarily have at that particular moment, right? There's people I'm sure that you've encountered, I've encountered them as well, where they ask for advice and they say, hey, how am I going to fix this situation? And it's such a mess that you realize it's going to take a miracle of God to truly change some hearts and change some things around, because there's no necessarily human answer to some of the issues. So you've seen that, right? A little bit?
Yeah. And can I share a story with you?
Absolutely.
So in 2016, 2017, my grandmother was in hospice care.
Okay.
And my mother became her primary caretaker.
Okay.
And through that journey, her battle with addiction increased dramatically. It was, I've never seen my mom struggle like she was struggling in that season, caring for her dying mother. And after she passed away, we got some news about my father. Now, I had attended church that morning, and it was a church that I had just started going to, and I still, was very rocky. I had just left college and lived a very party lifestyle in college, and was repenting and turning back to God at that time. And the service was about miracles.
Okay.
Sorry, I got a call. The service was about miracles, and how if you had just the mustard seed of faith, that God could perform a miracle in your life, would you raise your hand and pray this prayer? And I thought, well, same thing as I did when I gave that first call to Jesus and received him. I thought, okay, I do have a mustard seed. Like, God, if you could perform a miracle in my life, I could use a miracle right now. And I gotta believe that there's just a tiny little bit of faith that you could do miracles. Like, we'll start there. Like, not really 100% sure, but just like real small.
Yeah.
And I came home that day, and, just like a typical Sunday, my dad's sitting on the couch watching football, and the family's there hanging out. And my dad turns to my brother and I, and he says, I have some news to share. And he tells us that he has been diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer.
That can be very,
and
yeah.
And the same day, my mom had declared to our family that she was done with her addictions. And so I have these 2 pieces of information right after I prayed a prayer of miracle. And I thought, well, God, my dad can't die. There's no other option than him to survive this. So guess you're going to do a miracle. I guess you're going to do a miracle, because there was no allowing my mind to think otherwise. And so that's when I put my faith in Jesus, that he said he was going to perform a miracle, so he would.
Okay.
And now fast forward to 2021, and my dad is in his 3rd year of remission, and my mom is in her 3rd year of sobriety.
That's fantastic.
So
yeah, that's
I have to give God glory for that, because there was a solid year of it not looking like a miracle. So even in the midst of believing that God was performing a miracle, my dad's going through chemotherapy. He's extremely sick. My mom got worse in her addiction, and their marriage was on the rocks. And it was extremely hard being in that season, but I could only believe for a miracle. So I felt called to share this story to anyone who's listening that might be going through a tough season, but having faith through it, that it might not look how you think it should look, but if you keep believing, you'll see through to the other side, and you will know that God is who God says he is, and who he's good in the way that we know him to be good, even if it doesn't look like it the way that we might want it to look in that moment.
Absolutely. And actually, Jasmine, as you're mentioning that, I can't help but think about the passage where Jesus is on the boat and he's sleeping, and the storm is getting crazy. And even though the disciples that are on that boat were trained fishermen, they were seeing a circumstance that they had never seen before. And it got crazy to the fact that they thought they were going to die. They weren't going to make it. And they woke him up saying, don't you care that we're perishing? Don't you care that we're going to die? And Jesus asked them at that point, where is your faith? And so I think what's coming to my mind based on the story you just shared is Jesus was in control all the time, but in order for them to really see what faith needed to be, the storm had to get intense. And often that's why it'll go bad, because otherwise it's like, oh yeah, well, it worked out. It could have been God. Maybe it wasn't. But when it gets where it's like, wait a minute, there's no other explanation. We were dead in the water here, literally, right?
Yeah.
So that's what comes to my mind when you share that story. So since then, I mean, has God kind of given you, I mentioned in the introduction that a lot of people ask the wrong questions in life. They're asking, well, I wonder what I want to do. And I know there was a point in your life where you were starting to ask God, what am I supposed to do? What's the opportunity? What direction am I supposed to go? So what kind of direction has he started to reveal to you?
Yeah, so for me, I asked that question at a point in my life when I had encountered many closed doors, and really understanding that it was my will I had, sought a life path for.
Okay.
And it took a lot to lay that down. But I stepped out knowing that there was something more for me, that I was called to do something else other than what I was trying so hard to do.
Okay.
And it really was revealed to me when with my community is so important.
Yes.
Having a godly community, people that you can talk to and go through the struggles of life with. Yeah. And I was involved with a sisterhood group, and our table leader was also the worship leader at the church I went to, and she was somebody that I just felt such a strong soul connection to.
Okay.
And I had her pray with me one day because I was just in the midst of despair, really. Really questioning what was going to be of my life. I knew God had me in a season where he was providing for me. And it was such a blessing, but I knew he was calling me to challenge further and to ask deeper questions. And this was also at the same time that out in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the riots from George Floyd were happening. Sure. And so I'm watching the news and everyone's in masks and they're running around the city, lighting things on fire. And then it spreads into a nationwide, a global cause, and everything's on fire and riots are going on. And I'm just thinking to myself, what a time to be alive. And God, more than that, I see a community of hurting people. When I watched the news, it wasn't left or right, black or white for me. I saw a people that were hurting. And I knowing and identifying so strongly with my Native American culture, I know how broken systems are and how that broken system is shattered into thousands of little tiny pieces.
Yes.
And so I began to ask God, how can I help? What is my piece in this puzzle? Where do I fit in all these shattered pieces? Where can I go to? What can I do to help a community that's hurting? And after she prayed, for God to reveal that to me, the last thing that she said was that, Jasmine, you're in God's presence when you feel a sense of peace. And so after we hung up, I said, girl, I need some peace. I'm going to go to sleep because I've been emotional all day and I need some rest. Let me get this peace. And so once I woke up to a job offer, and I knew that it was from God because he confirmed it again and again. I would get off of the meeting with the managing partner, and I would step outside and I'd see a rainbow. We'd have our follow-up call, and I'd step outside and I'd see another rainbow on a different day. And it was just confirmation after confirmation that was the direction and that was the place that I needed to be. And it proved to be a blessing in 1,000 different ways in my life, a million tiny little pieces of my own life that I didn't even know I needed a blessing in. But through that experience, he's shown me what it means to lean on him and to spend time with him and to really seek him. I think is the biggest thing is seeking God and having your heart towards seeking him out, because where you seek, you will find. And we know his voice as his sheep. And so it's just taking that time to be still and to ask those questions and to seek him out, because you will know when something is from God. And that experience alone has given me such a hunger to fulfill God's will in my life. I only want what God has for me, because knowing what it feels like to live life without him and to do things on my own, and knowing what it's like to live life knowing that God is going to provide for me in the exact moment that I need to be provided for. He'll give me everything that I need. It's such different way of living, and I'm so much more confident in my life, even as I continue growing in my faith.
So it's interesting what you mentioned, because I want to make sure that our listeners here pick up on this. When you were looking and asking the question, had the prayer, and you're saying, hey, what is it I'm supposed to do? It was not necessarily based on your need. It was based on the need that you were seeing. You saw people, you saw hurting people from all cultures, from all backgrounds. There's millions of people out there that needed help. And you asked a very simple question that you didn't need to have the answer for as far as figuring out yourself. And that question was, how can I be someone who's going to be a blessing to other people, who's going to help other people, right?
Yeah.
And I believe what you're seeing and what you're testifying to here is that when we ask God that question and we're willing to be open to the answer, he does answer. And it didn't take very long that he answered either. So you mentioned a few things. You got a message the very next morning when you woke up after going to sleep. Did you have a good sleep that night, by the way? I'm just curious.
It was actually a nap.
It was like a nap.
So we had prayed in the middle of the day, and I took like a maybe 2-hour nap, and I woke up, and first thing people do when they wake up, check their phone, and I had a message for a job offer.
Well, God does great things during our naps. Even in the Garden of Eden, he created woman out of Adam's nap, right? So, God does some great things during those naps. He doesn't need us to be up and doing stuff. So he did that, and there it was. And then you mentioned a rainbow. Some people may not know that rainbow is, the reason we even know about a rainbow is it was a sign that God gives to not, judge the earth again by water. But the reality is that it's a sign that he gave for that. And it's definitely something that comes from God. So it's kind of cool that he kind of used that in your life a couple of times, kind of like, hey, I'm right here.
Yeah. It was definitely a confirmation that he's a God who fulfills his promises.
Absolutely. That's one thing about God that people need to understand. We don't necessarily always fulfill our promises due to various reasons, but he does. And that's a great thing. So you get into business. How now since that time, how long ago was that?
That was about, August, a little over a year ago.
Okay. So how has your vision maybe expanded, changed? God maybe has put a few more pieces of the puzzle in there over that last year. Any new changes or revelations there?
Well, for me, God has definitely expanded my vision in terms of, I call it ripping up the list.
Okay.
Where it might not sound like an expanded vision, but it's more of taking the desires of my heart and the things that, because I believe that everyone's desires are unique to them.
Sure.
And that what's on the inside of me and the desires that I have for my life aren't necessarily the same desires that you have for your life. Right. So, and that's not to say that mine are better or yours are worse. It's just these are the desires that God's placed within me to motivate me and to, help me fulfill the will that he has for my life. Right. So even though I might say, I want this, that, and the other, it's what's driving me to do his work. Because I always like to go back to, what is it that you would have me do? What is your will for me in my life? Because that's where my fulfillment is going to come from. It's not going to come from, the approval of other people or these worldly possessions or, these things. That's not where my joy is going to come from. My joy is always going to come from the Lord. And so even as I am walking in the light, I'm still seeking him, like, God, are you here? Or are you here? Are you here? Are you here? Like, I always want to be with him in the light, and really anchored to what he would have me do and what my will is, because I know I'm here to serve other people, and he's expanded my vision in how I'm here to serve, and in what capacity I'm here to serve. So it's an everlasting journey, this walk with God. Yeah. And through my experiences, it's given me confidence to know how to seek him, how to follow in his path, and how to hear his voice, and to know, this is something that comes from God, and that it's not just something in my own desire and my own will.
Right. Now, along with that, an interesting question that comes to my mind here that I want to throw out to you. You have that perspective in business as you're trying to help people. You mentioned service. That's a big thing. And I agree with you 100%. I believe we are on this earth to serve others and to serve God. You mentioned that not only obviously can you do that as far as helping clients in the area of finance and securing things for their future and college funding and you name it, all the different things like that, but also giving other people an opportunity not only to develop their business, but personal development, all types of different areas. You're doing this through a lens of faith, okay? Although there's a lot of people in our business that don't have that faith. All right, they don't have it. I'm just curious, because I think about this a lot. What do you think it would be like doing the same things you're doing right now, but if you didn't have that faith? How would it be a totally different perspective, and maybe not as clear cut as it is to you right now?
I am going to speak from experience.
Sure.
Because my walk with God isn't perfect. I'm not here to say every single day I am a faithful Christian. Like, that's just not my story. There are days,
yeah.
right? There are days when I do doubt, when I do lack faith, when I do, sin. Like, let's be honest. Everyone sins every single day. So I'm going to speak from experience. And I know when my heart is fixed on myself and my self gain, it doesn't feel good. It feels very wrong and unethical to me. When my heart is in, okay, how can I utilize this platform God's given me to benefit myself? Mm-hmm. And when my heart is in that posture, when I'm thinking of myself only, I know something's off, and that I need to, tighten the gears and realign and go on a fast, or, devote myself to small groups, or, I need to reset and sharpen my axe. Mm-hmm. Because I know what it feels like to be in a heart posture where it's not about me and it's about everyone else that I can bless. And I'm so grateful that God placed me in the business that I'm with, and the people that I'm with, because I have full confidence that even when my heart posture isn't in that place, and I have a whole handful of other people that I can say, hey, run with this person right now, because this isn't, I gotta work on me. I gotta develop as a person myself. And so I'm so blessed to have the people in my life that I do, because they allow me to grow in my faith. They encourage me to grow in my faith. They support me in my faith and doing what I need to do to grow as a person. And that is, you don't find people like that every day. And so I know that I'm at the right place.
Awesome. So have there been times that when you mentioned you get a little bit off, maybe get caught up in I've got to do this, this is what's going to benefit, this is what it says I need to do. Have you felt at times as when you're off like that, that almost like the power of it, the assistance of it from God, all I found at times, and I mean, I've been doing it 10 years, and there were times when I literally felt that although I knew I was in the right place, God was actually blocking me
Mm, right.
because it's like, there's something you need to learn here, and you don't have the right perspective at the moment. Have you experienced any of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about it like and I don't know how right or wrong this is, but I think about it like the thing that comes to my mind is a faucet, and like the water, when you turn the water on and it's just flowing, and sometimes it
Mhm.
feels like drinking from a fire hose. Like
Right.
there's so much blessing. And
Yeah.
then at other times it's like, okay, it's just dripping, and it's, it might be a consistent drip. There's always
Mhm.
goodness, there's always like water, there's always sustenance,
Yeah.
but it's just coming slower. And those are the times where I'm like, okay, wait a minute, check myself. Where am I? Where am I thinking? Like I had mentioned earlier, I'm very reflective and like a deep thinker. So
Mhm.
those are the times where I'm like, okay, there's something going on in my thoughts or in my mind that I need to bring to the Lord, that I need to pray through, that I need to talk to God about and meditate on, because you're right, there is something that I'm being that he's growing me through, or
Right.
he needs to press something out of me that maybe I was holding on to, and I'm trying to keep control over something. So it's those times when I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, God, what are you doing? What work are you doing in me right now that I can then, brush it off, come back, even stronger.
Yeah, and it could be at times as well, just so people know, it's not always that we're doing something wrong. It could
Mhm.
be that things are going very well, and now there's a question of whether we're going to trust and comprehend the lessons that we've already learned. So for
Mhm.
sometimes when people see things change, they start to panic and they start to say, "Oh, wait a minute. Oh, now I need to make more money, or I need to get things going. Oh, hold on. There's something else I have to do." And God may be saying, "Haven't I consistently provided? Just keep your eye in the right place and and just don't be anxious about it, right? Because do you trust that I've got it?" And I know for myself, there are times when there's that reminder that comes in, and I just have to think about it. So your vision then, what would you say? I'm not sure if there are or not. Are there any goals? I mean, obviously God laughs at our plans when they're not his. I get that. But has there been any sense of a next big goal for you? Something that you feel he's possibly leading you to?
Um, it's more of breaking generational cycles within my family,
Okay.
just as my parents created a new standard for my brother and
Right.
I believe he's called me to create that new standard for my family, and the family that I'll be blessed to raise one day. And it
Sure.
started 10 years ago, it starts right now, every moment in between. And so um that's more the goal and the vision that I have, and really knowing and trusting that I'm that person if I remain obedient to his will and not my own.
Right. Okay. So on that, let me just ask you this. Has there been one or two, what would be one or two of the biggest challenges that you think you faced in life, but even since being a person of faith that God's maybe taken you through, or possibly you're still in it? I don't know. And the reason I ask you is not to get real personal, but I think when we share things that there's usually somebody out there that identifies and is going through something very similar.
Could you repeat the question one more time?
Maybe one or two of the biggest challenges that you've had to deal with in life to overcome.
Yeah. So I'll start with what I'm currently going through, and then I'll give some hope and encouragement for what he's delivered me from.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
So personally, I am going through letting go of depression and anxiety.
Okay.
And I know he's a God who can deliver me from that. And so it's a challenge to, instead of, mulling and resting in whatever anxious thoughts I'm having, or any thoughts of the past or worries of the future, it's challenging for me to, have my response be to go to the word, or to turn on a service, or turn on worship music, or worship and praise him, or just to even stop and just start to thank him. It's a challenge for that to become my first response.
Okay.
And the other challenge that he's delivered me from was suicide.
Okay.
About it last September, so a year ago, I knew somebody who took her own life.
Yeah.
And it was God who it really triggered something within me. I hadn't thought about it in a long time, and it brought up a lot of old feelings that I used to have, and it came to the surface. And I was in church one day just sobbing. I sat at the top because I didn't want anyone to talk to me. I was one of those people. And there were two sweet old ladies. There was one who came up, and I was just glaring at her. I was like, I don't want to talk to you. Why are you here? And she just had such a heart, and she pressed in and asked me what was going on. And after the service, we prayed for God to deliver me from the suicidal thoughts I was having, and I haven't had any since. Truly believe that that's not something that is part of me anymore. And and I know that it's possible for the other challenges that I'm struggling with, even now.
Yeah. I just want to encourage you for the fact that you just shared that, because I know it's not easy to share. But I will tell you at the same time, I think it's so important that you did, because over the last year or so or more, I've just heard from every avenue of life. I mean, we're talking Christian musicians, we're talking people in churches, we're talking people everywhere, that subject of anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. I know right now, as people are listening to this, there's people out there that have been battling with that themselves. And I think that it's important to know that you're not alone in that. It's important to know that God does care, that really he is the one to be able to go to. I know that sounds like just a pat answer, but I mean, really, let's face it, situations in life can be overwhelming. They can be scary. We feel out of control quite often. And the only real answer to that is to be able to spend some time and rest in the one who actually is in control, which is in God. He's the only one that is. And so I'm very glad that you encouraged that. In fact, we're going to finish up just with this last question, which kind of goes along with the answer that you just gave. Maybe there's somebody out there right now, we don't know who's listening, and it could be even a year from now from the recording of this. We don't know when it's going to be seen, and they're going through a really hard time right now. They're trying to find a sense of direction, purpose in life. Maybe it seems like they're just existing. Based on how God has helped you, what is he moving in your heart right now to say to them?
Try Jesus. Just try. If you are that person who just needs something, whatever that something is, just try Jesus. Just try. That's all it took for me. It's just the tiniest little bit of of belief, of thought. And this is only the beginning of my journey. And
Mm.
so I know that, even just what he's done in my life is enough for me to have full confidence in Jesus. And so just try.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, Jasmine, for being with us today. I know that it's going to be a blessing to many that are going to be listening to this podcast. So grateful for you. We're encouraged by what you're doing. I know that God's going to do many more great things through the years to come through you, and the way that you're going to be a blessing to so many others. For those of you out here listening to this, we encourage you not only to subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss a single episode, but with this episode and others, be sure to share them with people that you know that would be blessed by them and be encouraged by them. Meanwhile, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to take the advice that Jasmine just gave you, which is to give God a try, because he says that when we come to him, he will not turn us away. So God bless each one of you. This has been the Audacious Faith Podcast. Take care.